This is a picture of Western society in the early 21st century. There are three basic types of worldviews from which people understand reality. Sometimes these systems are called worldviews, sometimes closed world systems, or plausibility structures, or horizons. Here is the first structure. For the first time in human history, there is an option to believe that there is no divine or spiritual reality of any kind. The only thing that exists is the physical, material substance that can be observed and explained through math and science. Charles Taylor calls this the immanent frame. It is the dominant worldview of the modern West, and the only one allowed in the public sector. There are still those individuals, however, who choose to believe in their private lives in something spiritual that is beyond the material world. There are many variations of this, but for the sake of this conversation, we'll talk about them in two categories. On one side, there are those who think of the spiritual or divine as being separate and completely different from the physical. This is dualism once again. God is up here, and the hope of humanity is to jump the gap of sin and separation and be united with God up here. The physical universe will be either completely eliminated, or at best, it will be destroyed and remade. So what exists now doesn't really matter. The spiritual transcends the physical. We'll label this view transcendence. On the other side, there are those who believe that there is no actual separation between the spiritual and the physical. They are one. The spiritual is within. It is the life force of the universe. And the hope of humanity is to find unity and harmony with the spiritual, so that the world may live in peace and not destroy itself. God is within. God is immanent, meaning within itself. We'll label this view immanence. So now we have three distinct systems coexisting: the material atheistic public sphere, the transcendent dualist sphere, and the immanent spiritualist sphere. Which one is right? How can these different spheres coexist in a productive way? What is the role of the church in this? The so-called conservative Christians typically fall in the transcendent camp, and the so-called liberal Christians typically fall into the immanence camp. How does the gospel fit into all of this? It often seems like there are only two options. You either A, believe your view is the only correct view and fight to dominate the others. This usually leads to violence, bloodshed, war, poverty, and famine. Or B, each camp retreats into its own circle and says, live and let live, and the world stays segmented and alienated in isolated camps. Neither option looks like peace on earth, goodwill toward humanity, or good news for anybody. What if there is a third way? What if the reason these spheres exist is because they each experience a unique part of the reality of God that shapes their perspective and behavior, thus making each of them true but incomplete? Further, what if the path to peace was found in the Trinity and the spiritual practices of relating to the Trinity? Before we talk about that, it will be helpful to discuss a concept called the fusion of horizons, made famous by a man named Gadamer. A literal horizon is the limit of a person's perspective in relation to the fact that the Earth is a sphere. It isn't a real boundary, but is created by the person's position on the planet. If you want to expand your horizon, you must change your position. When you go higher, you see more. Let's say you wanted to get the maximum horizon possible. If you went out in space and got far enough away, you could see your maximum horizon. The problem is that even though you have reached your maximum horizon, you can still only see part of the total picture at one time. If you want to see the whole picture, then you have to get other people involved. Let's launch 2 more satellites. Now we have 3 overlapping horizons. The only way one person can get a picture of the whole is if she talks to the person in each of the other satellites and they fuse their pictures into one combined picture. This fusion of horizons is not reality itself, but is a socially constructed representation of reality that will help each individual gain a better, but not perfect, understanding of what lies beyond their own horizon. The only way this can work is if each individual trusts the other and allows herself to receive the other horizon and share her own. This constructed understanding will constantly shift and change as each individual orbits the earth and understands their own perspective in new ways. It is the relationship between each individual which creates the larger shared reality. Which comes first, the relationship or the individual? Exactly. This brings us back to the Social Trinity. What if the fact that humanity has multiple systems from which it perceives reality is a reflection of the essence of God? God is the relationship between the lover, the beloved, and love. There is an aspect of God which is transcendent, that is not created or physical. This is the lover. There is also an aspect of God which is pure spiritual energy and is that which gives life. This is love. This is the Spirit. There is also that aspect of God which is enfleshed, that enters into and shares the physical bodily reality of the created thing. This is the beloved. It is the relationship of these three that creates and sustains life. The spiritual disciplines that will bring growth, healing, and peace on earth, the good news for all nations, are those that allow us to humbly enter into the conversations that allow us to fuse our horizons in humility and love for the neighbor. What might that look like for people within each of these systems to realize that the relationships we have with each other actually form who we are? What might this look like in our own neighborhoods?